So the US government is hoping to pass something called the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act, and some people are saying this is the most important crypto law in American history.
I do think it's very important for any legislation to meet technology where it's at, and that is what the Clarity Act draft tries to do.
While others say it's just Washington catching up to what the rest of the world already figured out years ago. But here's the crazy part. This law wouldn't just affect crypto exchanges or big crypto companies. It has ripple effects that could touch everyday investors like you and me, and even how we use cold wallets to secure our crypto.
I rise in strong support of the Clarity Act. I think two things are clear. First, the digital asset and blockchain technology are leading the next wave of financial innovation, and we need to make sure that that innovation is occurring here in the United States of America.
In other words, if you care about where crypto could be heading in the next 5, even 10 years, the Clarity Act is something that you need to understand, so let's break it down step by step. Basically, it's a new legal framework that tries to answer the billion-dollar question we've all been asking since Bitcoin was created. Is it a security, a commodity, or something else entirely? Before we answer that, let's break down what each of these are. A security is basically an investment contract. Think of it like buying stocks in a company. You're putting in money with the expectation that someone else, such as the founders, is going to do work and make you a profit. Classic examples are stocks and bonds. So if a cryptocurrency is considered a security, it would have to follow these same rules as Wall Street: heavy disclosures, SEC oversight, and lots of regulation. A commodity, on the other hand, is more raw stuff, things like gold, oil, and even wheat. No one necessarily controls these things, but they rely on supply and demand to determine their value. If a certain crypto were classified as a commodity, it would fall under the CFTC, which is generally lighter on regulation than the SEC. When Bitcoin was first created, a lot of people argued it should be treated as a commodity because it doesn't necessarily have a CEO or even a company backing it. It's actually mined like some sort of digital gold. And then you've got stablecoins. These are like digital dollars pegged to real money, usually backed by US treasuries. Stablecoins are less about speculation and resources and more about payments. So basically the bridge between old money and the new digital version. So here's the key. The Clarity Act is Washington's attempt to finally draw the lines between these three categories: who regulates what, and what rules these crypto projects have to follow. Think of it like this. Imagine you're driving down a highway with no lines on the road. So you've got cars driving on the left, a bunch in the middle, and some on the right. No one actually knows what the rules are. That's what crypto regulation has felt like so far. The aim of the Clarity Act is to come in and paint bright yellow lines on the road. You might not like where they put those lines, but at least you'll know which lane you're supposed to be in. Alright, second question. Why does this matter to you and me as everyday investors? Well, for the first time ever, we could finally know who's in charge of what. Up until now, a lot of projects were being sued after the fact. You would buy into something and years later a regulator would say, oh, actually that's an unregistered security. And boom, the cryptocurrency's delisted from the exchange and you're left holding the bag. This is exactly what happened to XRP back in 2020. With the Clarity Act, crypto projects now have a path to register correctly or avoid registering if they fall under the commodity lane. That means less guessing, less fear, and hopefully less chances that you'll wake up and your favorite cryptocurrency will be delisted from the exchange. Third question, how does this affect you if you use a cold wallet? Because let's be real, that's what a lot of us care about. Who regulates you when you're in control of your crypto because you use a self-custodial wallet? Here's the good news. The Clarity Act is not going after people who keep their crypto in a cold storage wallet. Why? Because the whole point of a cold wallet is to secure your crypto and not have to rely on third parties like exchanges, brokers, and banks to secure it for you. Now let's put that into perspective. Imagine your crypto as a big bag of money. You take that big bag of money and you hand it to the bank. The government now regulates how they store it, report it, and lend it. But if you keep that bag of money in a safe in your basement, it's still yours. The government can regulate the bank, but they can't regulate the safe in your basement. And that's how the government currently looks at cold wallets. What the Clarity Act really focuses on are the middlemen: exchanges, brokers, stablecoin issuers, crypto projects. They're the ones who will have the clearer rules and regulations. So if you're a cold wallet user and you enjoy being your own bank, here's my takeaway. Your self-custody isn't being outlawed. You can and still should own your crypto directly. But the way you buy, sell, or trade might change because the platforms you interact with will be under tighter rules. In a way, that could actually be a good thing because less shady exchanges and more accountability means fewer chances of another FTX-style collapse wiping out people's holdings. But the bottom line is, if you're using a Ledger, Trezor, Tangem, or any other cold wallet, you're still out of direct reach of the regulators. The Clarity Act is really about putting guardrails around the highways of crypto, not about taking the keys out of your pocket. That said, if you actually want to be your own bank, meaning you're in full control of your crypto and don't rely on a third party to secure it for you, you need a cold wallet. My favorite one is Tangem. This is what I use personally, and this is what I recommend to most beginners because of how ridiculously easy it is to set up and use. I'll make sure to drop a link along with the discount code to this wallet in the description if you want to check it out. Now, fourth question, what does this mean for the bigger picture? The adoption of crypto itself. Here's where this law might end up being a double-edged sword. On one hand, big institutions like pension funds, mutual funds, and banks have been waiting for clarity before touching crypto. They didn't want to risk billions of dollars on assets that regulators could later declare illegal. Now with the Clarity Act spelling out categories and agency responsibilities, these big players have the green light. In theory, that means more money, more liquidity, and potentially higher prices across the board. On the other hand, regulation always comes with trade-offs. Projects that used to thrive in the shadows could disappear, and tokens that can't meet disclosure requirements might vanish. Also, DeFi protocols might need to adjust or register in ways that could change how they operate. In short, the Wild West era of crypto could be ending, and we're seeing the beginning of a more structured, rules-based era. Now let's slow down for a second and focus on the obvious question, is this good or bad for crypto? The answer is, it depends. If you're someone who loved the early days of crypto because it was outside government control, the Clarity Act probably feels like a step in the wrong direction. But if you're an everyday investor who just wants to buy Bitcoin or Ethereum without worrying about lawsuits or exchanges shutting down, this law could feel like a huge win. Now, here's another question. How exactly could this affect the long-term value of crypto? Well, think about how traditional markets have grown. Stocks, bonds, real estate, they didn't really explode until regulators set up rulebooks that allowed big investors to come in safely. For example, after the Wall Street crash of 1929 destroyed investor confidence, Congress created the SEC in 1934. For the first time, companies were forced to publish audited financials. It didn't spark an overnight boom, but over time that transparency rebuilt trust, and eventually big money started flowing back into stocks. I think the Clarity Act could force crypto to go through a very similar phase. With a clear legal framework, the big players will feel much more confident investing in the crypto market in the long run. And when trillions of dollars that used to sit on the sidelines start to pour into the digital asset market, well, you can imagine what that does to supply and demand. But here's a part most people aren't talking about. The Clarity Act forces the US to take a leadership role in crypto globally.
Second, under the previous administration, the United States failed to enact a regulatory framework that's aligned with the realities of the technology and adequately protects consumers. Today, the House has an opportunity to meaningfully improve the status quo that for too long has been marred by uncertainty and regulatory enforcement. The Clarity Act establishes a workable, forward-looking framework. The Clarity Act provides and ensures the markets operate with transparency, accountability, and strong consumer protections.
For years, other countries like Switzerland, Singapore, and even tiny island nations were out ahead, offering more lenient rules, while the US was lagging and stuck in lawsuits. But now America has planted its flag. This could bring innovation back to US soil, attract more startups, and potentially give the dollar-backed stablecoin a stronger position as the backbone for global crypto trading. Speaking of stablecoins, let's dig into that for a second. Stablecoins are digital tokens pegged to the US dollar. They're supposed to be safe, but up until now, they were barely regulated. Some stablecoins are backed by physical assets, while others are backed by trust. However, the Clarity Act forces stablecoin issuers to hold real reserves like treasury bills and submit to oversight. For the everyday user, this should mean that stablecoins are much more stable and reliable, and you don't have to worry about them ever dipping in value. So if you want to hold cash in digital form on your cold wallet, for example, and essentially be your own bank, you can do this a lot safer. But, and this is a big but, and big buts don't lie, this also means the government will have more control. If stablecoins are tightly regulated, they will be monitored much more closely. In other words, we're trading some freedom for more security, and this is the same trade-off we see across the entire Clarity Act. More structure, more safety, but more oversight. So where does this all leave us? Well, here's my takeaway. The Clarity Act is not about killing crypto, it's about taming it. It's Washington realizing that they can't ignore it any longer, and they may as well come in and write the narrative and own it. For investors, it means more confidence, fewer surprises, and probably more growth in the long run. For cold wallet users, well, really not a lot has changed. And for the long-term growth of crypto, it means bigger investors are going to feel more confident pouring in more money. That said, I believe crypto can gain legitimacy and mainstream adoption while also losing some of its raw, rebellious spirit, and the Clarity Act is just the latest chapter in that story. So the real question isn't whether this is good or bad. The real question is, how are you going to position yourself in this new era of crypto? Are you going to try to play by the rules and take advantage of it? Or are you going to cling to the old Wild West era that's fading quickly? Because whether you like it or not, the rules of this game are changing. But one thing that will never change is how important security plays a role in this space. So if you want to ensure you're storing your crypto as safely as possible, these 5 levels of crypto security will show you where you stand and how to level up. God bless, peace.